Philodendron is a well-known houseplant. These aroids can withstand low light conditions and can thrive in humidity. There are more than 500 plus varieties of these plants, but today we'll be talking about the rarest of these species. Just a disclaimer that some of these rare plants might not be rare for you. We will be talking about commercial rarity. In other words, plants that are hard to get hold of and not cultivated widely. Some of these plants are also endangered and protected. With that out of the way, let's get right into the video. Philodendron Pink Princess. Yes, this had to be the first one on the list as it has taken over the internet over the past few years. This pink beauty is cultivated in labs using tissue culture and cannot be found in the wild. A mere cutting of this plant could cost you $100 depending on where you live, and some established plants which can cost you up to $2,000. Be careful while buying this plant though. I've heard a lot of rumors and fakes going in and about the internet. Philodendron campus or campos. Its leaf texture is similar to the common Philodendron micans, but campus is well known for its tri-lobed leaves. When it matures, it develops a pink hue on the leaves which gives it a very unique look. I have got my eyes on this plant and I love it. This plant is considered rare but has been widely cultivated in the recent few years. A mature plant can cost you upward $100, which is not as expensive but is pretty hard to get hold of depending on where you live. Philodendron serpens. Now this is a pretty unique plant and I've had my eyes on this one for quite some time now. What I really like about this plant is the fuzzy stems or the petiole. The tiny hair that are covered on the stem look really unique. Now unrooted cuttings for this plant can cost you about $100 to $140 depending on how many leaves it has and all that. But I have seen pictures and prices online that can go up to $1,000 depending on the size of the plant and where you live. Philodendron polypodiotis. I'm never gonna pronounce that. A very unique leaf shape of a philodendron, but it just fits. It might look scary and it looks like the Halloween version of Philodendron florida, but these are very, very unique looking plants. They are considered rare due to their very slow growth. They are pretty widely known but are still hard to get hold of, and a cutting with aerial roots could just cost you over $100. I haven't come across any mature plants of this variety, but I'm sure to update you all if I get to know anything. Philodendron opii. Now when I looked at this plant, I was like, wow, is this really a plant? Opii is considered as an exotic houseplant nowadays, and you can see why. According to researchers, this plant has improved air purifying qualities which makes it even more irresistible. Now when this plant was discovered, it was apparently growing on a nest of ants in 1991. The leaves can grow up to 27 inches long and the whole plant can reach heights up to 3 to 4 feet. Well, a 2-leaf cutting can cost you just above $100, but the variegated version of this plant can go upward to $2,600 for just a cutting. The Philodendron 69686. Now when you look at the name of this plant, you might be wondering why. Why is it even named like that? Well, this is not a name. This plant is still undescribed. That means that it's not officially recognized by botanists. So the true origin of this variety still remains unknown. It is probably a natural hybrid found in the Brazilian rainforest, but when Thomas B. Kraut, the one who discovered this plant, just gave the ascension number 69686 to this plant and it remained like that ever since. Yes, it is very similar to the opii we mentioned before, but this is even rarer. Now this plant has slightly rounded lobes with the upper ones resembling bunny ears, as you can see in the pictures. It is also classified endangered due to habitat loss, and very less cultivators have held on to this specific species. These plants were even auctioned back in 2007 for a huge amount of money. Well, I couldn't find any sellers selling this particular species, and of course, due to its rarity, it's very, very hard to get hold of. The Philodendron Patrick. This plant was also found and described by the same person who discovered the last plant, Thomas Kraut, and apparently he named it after his wife Patricka. because he believed it was the most elegant philodendron he had ever seen. A mature plant can grow leaves up to 46 inches long, and the total height of the plant can reach to 12 to 13 feet. This is why a mature plant is very hard to obtain in today's market. I'll keep my eyes wide open for one, but I'm sure I'm not going to find it. I did come across sellers selling juvenile plants that were costing $250 to $300 depending on where you live. There's not much I can talk about these plants. I'm gonna let the pictures do the talking. Philodendron Jerihon. This philodendron is a natural hybrid of Philodendron bipifolium. It is native to the Brazilian rainforest, and this is probably the only plant on the list which isn't described or discovered by a botanist. Its name comes from the man who released it commercially in his own nursery, and his name was Jerry Horn. It was unknown until that point. This is probably my favorite from the list because I love the shape of the leaf, and the leaves can reach up to 3 feet, and a mature plant can leave heights up to 6 feet to 8 feet tall. It's not as expensive as the other plants on this list, but it's pretty hard to get hold of depending on where you live. Being native to one person and one nursery, it hasn't been widely distributed or throughout the whole world. The Philodendron Spiritus Sancti. Now this plant is probably gonna blow your mind. It was only found in the Brazilian state of Espírito Santo, and only a handful of these plants remain in the wild and are protected. This plant is probably on every plant parent's wish list and is only found in a few collections throughout the whole world. Philodendron Spiritus Sancti, or PSS for short, is like a leafy green Rolex. It's very hard to get hold of and it's pretty pricey. A small plant can cost you upward of $3,000 to $5,000 in today's market, depending on where you live. It is so expensive because it is very hard to cultivate and reproduce. And when it was discovered, only a few plants were discovered in the wild. Now, when it comes to a philodendron, you might think cuttings are probably the best way to multiply and keep going on. But when it comes to PSS, the only way and viable option is to grow it from seeds, when it produces a seed pod after a flower is being pollinated. Yes, that might sound like a very normal process, but you might realize that these philodendrons are very rare, and collecting pollen and pollinating a flower isn't easy by itself. That brings us to the end of the list. There were quite a few rare ones in there, and I probably think that I've added a few plants in your wish list. I hope I did. Make sure you guys leave a comment below telling me which plant you like the most from this list. Leave a like if you enjoyed, guys, and subscribe if you're new. Till then, stay loyal to the soil.